Gulliver's Travel. My adventures began when I accepted an offer from Captain Pritchard, master of the Antelope, to be ship's surgeon. We set sail from Bristol on May the 4th, 1699, headed for the South Seas, and at first our voyage was prosperous. Then a cry went up from the crow's nest. A storm was approaching. The storm struck with bestial fury. Our ship was almost overturned in the rough seas. 12 of our crew died from ill health and rotten food. The rest of us were in a weak condition. Then, tragedy. Our ship hit a rock and began to sink quickly. I called out an order to lower the boats. 6 of the crew, of whom I was one, climbed into the boat and rowed for all our might. A sudden wave tossed over us, and we were all thrown out. I saw my compatriots sink beneath the waters, until only I, Lemuel Gulliver, was left. I swam for my life. My body ached, and I believed my time to meet my Lord had finally come. Then I felt ground beneath my feet. I staggered through the water to shore, but there was no sign of houses or any inhabitants. Now the sun beat down hard upon me. I walked a mile before collapsing to the ground, where I fell into a deep sleep. When I recovered, I attempted to rise, but found I could not move my arms or legs or head, which were strongly fastened on each side to the ground. I heard a whispering, buzzing noise beside me, but I could not see anything except the sky. I felt something alive creeping over my left leg and working its way up to my chin. I looked as best I could and gaped in astonishment. For there, on my chest, stood a tiny man, less than 6 inches high, with a bow and arrow in his hands. At least 40 more followed the first, and in fright I roared loudly. They all ran back, falling over one another to get away. I was afterwards told that some of them were hurt when they leapt off me in fear. I struggled to free myself, breaking the strings that tied down my left arm and pulling some of my hair loose so that I could move my head. This terrified the little men. A shout went up, and 100 arrows flew through the air, striking my hand like so many needles. I protected my face with my arm, and then lay down again, knowing I could escape whenever I wanted. When the little men realized I was not trying to flee, they calmed down. After a while, when they saw that I did not threaten them, they cut some of the ropes that bound me, giving me more freedom. I saw that they had erected a stage for their emperor to speak with me. He spoke in words I could not understand, and I began to grow hungry. I gestured with my finger to my mouth and began to chew. The emperor understood at once and called to his men to bring me food and drink. Ladders were put up against my sides, on which over 100 inhabitants climbed up, bringing baskets full of meat and bread. There were shoulders and legs of mutton, but they were so tiny I kept having to ask for more. They were astounded when I drank a barrel of wine in one gulp. But the emperor called out, and they brought me more wine to drink. I confess I was tempted to seize 40 or 50 of them and dash them to the ground, but I felt that I should honor their trust, so I made signs to make them understand that I would not try to escape. They loosened the strings to give me comfort. They also tended to the wounds on my face and hands from their arrows. The excitement of my day soon helped me to sleep again. When I woke, I was tied to a wooden platform on wheels. It was being pulled by my 1,500 horses towards the capital city of these tiny people. The traveling went on all that day, and at night we rested. 500 guards stayed on each side of me, ready to shoot if I attempted to escape. The next morning, we arrived at the capital city. My platform was stopped beside a church, the biggest building in the kingdom. The emperor gestured that I was to live there. I had only enough room to lie down, and my left foot was chained, so I could not move very far. People came to visit me in their tens of thousands, but a proclamation was soon issued which forbade this upon pain of death. The emperor advanced on horseback towards me. Dismounting, he approached with a sword in his hand. His features were strong and masculine, and he was much taller than the other people of his court. He wore a helmet of gold, adorned with jewels and a plume on the crest. The ladies and courtiers were all splendidly dressed in gold and silver. The emperor attempted to talk with me, but neither of us could understand the other's language. In frustration, he gave up and left, no doubt to decide whether I should be killed or not. I would cost a great deal to keep as a pet, and to these small people I represented a danger. The crowd was becoming a rabble by now. Some threw stones, whilst one shot an arrow which almost took out my eye. The colonel of the soldiers rounded up 6 of the troublemakers, and because he could think of no better punishment, bound their arms and delivered them into my hands. I put 5 of them into my coat pocket, and as for the 6th, why, I pretended I was going to eat him. I lifted him to my face and opened wide my mouth. You should have heard the poor fellow squeal. I even frightened the soldiers when I took out my penknife, but they were much relieved when I cut the cords that bound my prisoners and set them on the ground. Everybody was surprised at my gentle treatment of their fellows. The emperor was holding a council meeting to decide what should be done with me. They were afraid my diet was such that it would cause a famine. Yet if they killed me with poisoned arrows, the stench of my corpse might cause a plague in the kingdom, which I later learned was called Lilliput. When the emperor heard how well I had treated the prisoners, he decided he would not have me killed. He made an order that I was to be fed 6 cows and 40 sheep every day, and wine to drink. I was allocated 600 persons to be my servants, and it was likewise ordered that 300 tailors should make me a suit of clothes to wear. My servants were to live in tents outside the church to make it easier for them. Finally, 6 of the emperor's finest scholars were to teach me their language so that we could communicate. 3 weeks later, I could talk and understand the little men. To show them how much they could trust me, I allowed 2 soldiers to make an inventory of everything in my pockets. When this was done, the emperor asked me what my pistols were for. I explained that they should not be afraid, and fired one into the air. Everybody screamed and ran at the loud bang, except for the emperor, and he turned very white. He told me to give up my pistols at once. This I agreed upon, and all my belongings were locked safely away in the emperor's storeroom, except for my eyeglasses, which were in a pocket the men had not found. My gentleness and good behavior began to win over the emperor and his people. After a while they stopped fearing me. At length some of them would come and dance on my hand, while the girls and boys played hide-and-seek in my hair, as I lay on the ground. One day, as I was entertaining the court by allowing riders to jump their horses over my hands, there arrived a telegram for the emperor from some of his subjects. It seems they had found a large black object close to where I was washed ashore. It was oddly shaped and was not alive, and they believed it belonged to the great Man Mountain, as the Lilliputians like to call me. I was pleased by this news, for I knew what the black object was, my hat. I thought it had been lost out to sea. The emperor ordered it brought to me, and this was done. Unfortunately, to bring it to the city, the subjects had to bore 2 holes in the brim, and fasten cords from the hat to the harnesses of 5 horses. Thus it was dragged along the ground for half a mile. But since this part of the countryside is quite smooth, It was not as badly damaged as I'd expected it to be. 2 days later, the Emperor asked me if I would take part in a procession. I gladly agreed. He requested that I stand with my legs apart. Then his army marched between them. With drums beating and flags flying, 3,000 foot soldiers and 1,000 horses drew past under me. After this, I again petitioned the Emperor to set me free. The court held a council meeting, and at length, with only one person opposed, the cabinet agreed, as long as I respected and obeyed their rules. I naturally agreed to all the terms, and my chains were cut free from my leg. At last, I was free. I kept my word and did not try to escape from the island, and this set me in good stead with the Emperor. My first request I made after my freedom was granted was to see the capital city, Mildendo, and the Emperor agreed that I could. All the people stayed inside their houses in case my giant feet accidentally walked on them. Instead, they crowded around the windows and watched as I stepped over the great western gate and made my approach to the Emperor's palace. It was a magnificent building. By lying down on my side, I was able to look inside the palace. There I saw the Empress. She was so pleased to meet me that she came to the window and gave me her hand to kiss. One morning, the principal secretary of the court came to see me. We talked of this and that, before he told me of a danger that was about to befall his beloved country. It seems that there is an island close by named Blefusco, and the little people there were making plans to invade Lilliput. The invading soldiers were without mercy and would fight to the death. The reason for this sorrow goes back to when the present emperor's grandfather, when he was a boy, cut his finger one morning as he took the top off his egg. Until that day, everyone had cut off the big end of their eggs. The emperor decreed that henceforth everyone had to cut off the small end. Those who did not would be put to death. There were revolutions and wars over this law, and eventually many of the Lilliput's inhabitants left the country and made their way to Blefusco, where they called themselves the Big Indians. Now they were coming to make war on Lilliput, and the emperor wanted my help to defend his country. I was informed that the Big Indians owned 50 warships lying at anchor and made plans to seize them. I fixed 50 hooks to 50 lengths of cable and then waded towards Blefusco. Since there was only half a mile between the two countries, it took me less than half an hour to arrive at the fleet. The enemy was so frightened at my appearance they leapt out of their ships and swam to shore. There were at least 30,000 of the soldiers, but I ignored them. I fastened a hook to the prow of each ship and then tied all the cords together at the end. While I was busy, the enemy fired thousands of arrows, many of which struck my hands and face. I feared for my sight, but remembered my eyeglasses in my pocket. These I fastened to my nose to protect my eyes. I cut the cables that held the ships in port, and then took up the knotted end of the cords to which my hooks were tied, and pulled the ships behind me back to Lilliput. The emperor was pleased with me, and wanted me to return to Blefusco immediately and bring back all of the enemy's ships. This would allow him to hold power over the country, and they would obey all his rules. But I refused to bring a brave people into slavery. The court agreed with my feelings. This angered the emperor, and he could not forgive me. 3 weeks after my adventure, an emissary from Blefusco came with the Lilliputians. They were most impressed when they saw me, and asked me to visit their country again one day as a friend so that their people could see how big I was. I promised that I would, which angered the emperor even more. I had also made an enemy of his chief admiral, who had hated me the first day I had arrived, but he had kept these feelings to himself. He held it against me that I had defeated the big Indian navy single-handed, after he had tried for many years without success. He also resented the fact that the court at Lilliput had made me a nardac, which is similar to a duke in our country. There were others who held a hatred of me, and planned to make me look bad to the emperor. To this end, they persuaded the emperor to invite me to dine with him. For this I readily accepted. I ate my fill, which which was several hundred cows, sheep, and fowl. The next day, the emperor was told that if I was not put to death, there would soon be no food available for their subjects. The emperor now held me in disregard for refusing to obey him, but he could not bring himself to kill me. I had, after all, helped his country against the Big Indians. He decided instead that the best punishment would be to put out my eyes. The principal secretary had remained my friend during my stay here. He came in secret to warn me what the emperor was planning so that I could save myself. I knew that I must leave before the worst happened. I went down to the shore where I took one of the emperor's ships. This I filled with my clothes so that they would remain dry. I tied a cable to the prow and pulled the ship behind me as I swam to Blefusco. The Emperor of Blefusco came out to receive me. He was pleased that I had come to his country, as were his people. They treated me well, and I grew to like them. But my heart was pining for my real home of England. One day, my chance came. A full-sized rowing boat, possibly the one I'd traveled on to escape my sinking ship, was found floating out at sea. With the help of the Big Indians, I brought it to shore. It took 2,000 of the little men to help me turn the boat upright. Then I worked hard to repair the damage. Eventually, my time had come. Storing food on board, and also live cows and sheep, which I wanted to show my family, I said goodbye to the little people and set off. 2 days later, I was picked up by a full-size sailing ship. The captain refused to believe my story until I showed him the miniature cows and sheep. When I got home, my wife and children were overjoyed to see me. They listened in fascination as I told them of my adventures. People stopped and stared at the tiny cows and sheep outside my house at Greenwich in London. But it wasn't long before I left to travel again. Perhaps I shall tell you about it someday.